The sound of keys rattled in the hallway long before Harold appeared. He moved slowly, not out of laziness, but because he learned that rushing made people notice him even more. Still, the moment he stepped through the door, the voice came sharp and cold. "Late again, huh?" Mr. Whitmore's tone carried the kind of authority that never needed a shout. He stood behind the reception desk, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on Harold like he'd been waiting for him all morning. "I told you, 7 o'clock means 7 o'clock, not 7:10, not 7:05. Harold took a breath, nodded lightly. "Yes, sir. The train was—" "I don't care about the train." Whitmore cut him off. "You people always have some story. Maybe if you cared as much about showing up as you do making excuses, you'd have a better job." The words hit harder than they sounded. The two security guards by the entrance looked away, pretending to be busy. Harold quietly reached for his mop bucket. He didn't answer. He never did. He'd learned a long time ago that some men didn't want a conversation. They wanted an audience. Whitmore watched him a moment longer, smirked, and turned away. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floors Harold had buffed just yesterday. But what Whitmore didn't know, what he couldn't imagine, was that the man he just humiliated didn't need that job. He owned the very floors Whitmore walked on.
Before we go further, if you believe in justice, in quiet dignity, in stories that prove respect still matters, subscribe to Black Justice. Because every story here carries a truth the world needs to hear.
The day went on like any other. The office building came alive with sound. Phones ringing, heels tapping, printers spitting out pages of someone else's success. Harold moved through it all like a ghost, invisible until someone needed him. "Hey, janitor," a young intern called, snapping her fingers toward a spill by the coffee station. Harold just smiled softly. "Right away, ma'am." He cleaned quietly while people chatted around him about clients, numbers, and bonuses, words that had long lost their meaning to him. At 64, Harold had worked more jobs than he could count. Factory floors, subway maintenance, night shift in warehouses where the air smelled like dust and oil. He'd seen every kind of boss there was. But there was something about this one, Whitmore, that reminded him why humility mattered. Every insult Whitmore threw came wrapped in professionalism, like poison in a glass of water. He'd never raise his voice. He'd just smile while doing it, and each word made the room smaller. By midday, the storm clouds rolled in. Rain tapped against the glass, streaking the clean windows Harold had polished just last week. He worked quietly near the elevators when Whitmore's voice broke the silence again. "Hey, you missed a spot here," he said, pointing with his shoe at an invisible mark on the floor. Harold glanced, then wiped it calmly. Whitmore folded his arms. "You know we have a schedule here. I can't have staff showing up late and slacking off." Harold simply nodded. He'd learned that silence carried more dignity than argument. "Don't just stand there," Whitmore said. "Say something." Harold straightened, his posture taller than before. "I try my best every day, sir. But sometimes things don't go as planned." Whitmore scoffed. "Your best isn't enough here. Maybe it's time we find someone who values this job." That line lingered, like a match hovering over gasoline. Harold looked him straight in the eyes, not out of defiance, but calm truth. "You're right," he said softly. "Maybe it is time." Then he went back to work, pushing his cart down the hall, leaving Whitmore standing there with confusion buried under arrogance. Later that evening, the building emptied. Only the hum of air vents and the echo of footsteps filled the corridors. Harold wheeled his cart into the janitor's closet, changed into his coat, and locked the door behind him. Outside, the rain had stopped. The streets shimmered with reflected light, puddles catching the glow of passing cars. Harold looked up at the building that had seen his sweat, his silence, and now his patience. Tomorrow, everything would change, but not the way Whitmore thought. The next morning, the building buzzed with something new. Posters hung in the lobby. Property transfer meeting, 10 a.m. Most people ignored them. Whitmore didn't. He'd been told the company leasing their floor was meeting the new ownership group today. He wanted to make a good impression. Pressed suit, polished shoes, his nameplate gleaming on his desk. New management means new standards, he told his assistant. Maybe they'll finally appreciate someone who runs a tight ship. At exactly 9:58, the elevator chimed. Two men in tailored suits walked out, followed by a familiar figure moving slowly behind them, carrying nothing but calm. Whitmore blinked. It couldn't be. Harold walked toward him. No cart, no mop, no uniform. Just the same quiet dignity, now wrapped in charcoal wool and a crisp white shirt. He nodded politely. Morning, Mr. Whitmore. For a second, the world went silent. Even the phone seemed to stop ringing. Whitmore forced a laugh. Harold, what's the meaning of this? You don't belong. One of the suited men stepped forward. Mr. Thomas is here for the ownership transfer meeting, he said evenly. He's the principal shareholder of HT Properties, LLC. Whitmore's throat tightened. That can't be right. Harold simply adjusted his cufflinks. It's right enough, sir. Each word made the air heavier. He didn't raise his voice. He raised the truth. Inside the boardroom, the long mahogany table gleamed under the soft ceiling lights. Whitmore sat near the end, eyes darting between documents stamped with new letterheads. HT Properties, LLC, acquisition of 125 West Broadway building. It was all there in ink and silence. When it came time for introductions, Harold's voice carried calm authority. Good morning, everyone. I'm Harold Thomas. I've worked in this building for 8 years. Quietly, I suppose. It's been educational. A polite ripple of awkward laughter moved through the room. Whitmore didn't join. Harold continued, measured and soft. I learned that titles don't define respect. Character does. Some of you treated me with kindness, some with indifference, and some, he paused, eyes landing on Whitmore, with lessons I won't forget. No anger, no revenge, just reflection heavy enough to echo. After the meeting, Whitmore followed him into the hallway. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded. Harold turned slowly. Would you have listened if I had? Whitmore opened his mouth, but nothing came. You judge me by my uniform, Harold said quietly, but I never needed it to know who I am. The manager swallowed hard. Look, if I said anything out of line. You did, Harold said, not harshly, but apology matters more than pride. If you're willing to learn, there's still a place for you here. Whitmore blinked. You keep me? I don't fire people for being late once, Harold replied. He walked away before the weight of mercy could crush the man behind him. That evening, Whitmore stayed late. For the first time, he noticed the fingerprints on the glass doors, the dust collecting in corners, the quiet hum of the lights. Things Harold used to fix before anyone saw. He felt the emptiness of superiority. It didn't echo, it whispered. The next morning, Whitmore waited by the service elevator. When Harold stepped out, Whitmore nodded. Morning, Mr. Thomas. Morning, Harold said, pausing. I wanted to thank you for the chance to stay. Harold smiled faintly. Just earn it. Respect's the only thing we build that never breaks. Whitmore nodded again, eyes lower than before. By noon, everyone in the building knew. The janitor was the owner, and the manager who'd mocked him now held the door open when he walked by. Not because he had to, because he finally understood why he should. The next week came quietly. No grand speeches. No headlines. Just small changes that said everything. The morning staff noticed that Whitmore started arriving early, 10 minutes before everyone else. He'd walk through the lobby, straighten a misplaced magazine, nod to the security guard. He even wiped a coffee ring off the reception counter once. The janitors joked that maybe he'd switch teams. He didn't laugh. He simply said, just trying to do my part. Harold noticed. He noticed everything. The man who once stood above him now walked beside him, not out of guilt, but understanding. One afternoon, they met by the elevators. No words at first. Just that quiet pause between two people who'd lived the same story from opposite sides. Whitmore cleared his throat. I've been thinking a lot, he said, about how easy it is to forget that people have lives beyond what we see. Harold nodded slowly. That's where most of us fail, Mr. Whitmore. We see uniforms, not people. We see lateness, not reasons. We judge before we ask. The elevator doors opened. Whitmore stepped in, but turned before they closed. "Thank you," he said softly, "for not teaching me the hard way." Harold smiled. "You already learned it the honest way." The doors shut between them, but something invisible stayed open, a bridge built from humility and respect. Days passed, then weeks. The building thrived under the new ownership. Policies changed, small but meaningful. Every employee, from front desk to maintenance, got new chairs, better break rooms, and something more important, acknowledgement. The staff meetings that used to end with instructions now ended with gratitude. Whitmore stayed, not because he needed the job, but because he wanted to become the kind of leader he'd never been. And Harold let him, because justice isn't about revenge. It's about renewal. One evening, Harold stood at the top floor window, the city glowing beneath him. The same glass he used to polish now reflected a man at peace. He thought of the long years, the silence, the countless times people looked through him instead of at him. He smiled, because now every reflection carried a lesson for him and for anyone who cared to look deeper. He walked toward the door, coat in hand. The cleaning crew was just starting their shift. He stopped by one of them, a young man, barely 20, nervous, tired, wiping his hands on a rag. "First day?" Harold asked. The young man nodded. "Yes, sir. I'm just trying not to mess up." Harold chuckled softly. "Everyone messes up, son. What matters is what you learn when someone gives you another chance." He handed the young man a key card. "Use this for the lounge upstairs. They've got fresh coffee. And don't let anyone make you feel small for doing honest work." The young man's eyes lit up. "Thank you, sir." Harold smiled again, that same calm smile from years before. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just pay it forward someday." As Harold stepped outside, the evening wind carried the hum of the city. Taxis, voices, life. He looked back once more at the towering glass building. It stood tall, proud, alive. A monument not to wealth, but to worth. And somewhere inside, Whitmore stood at the same window, watching him go. Not as a manager watching an employee, but as a man watching another man he finally respected, because power changes buildings, but respect changes people. And that was the kind of ownership Harold Thomas believed in. He didn't just own the building, he owned the lesson.
Before you go, if this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe to Black Justice. Every story here is a reminder that dignity outlives prejudice, and truth always finds its voice. Share this with someone who needs to remember that respect costs nothing, but means everything.